Some of our classes are taught from an interfaith and intercultural center. We are interfaith, intercultural, interdenominational, intersectional, and inclusive. 5 eyes. And as many classes as we can, we offer from multiple perspectives. If I can't get other people sitting next to me talking about their differing perspectives, then I try to reach out to people and get their perspectives. A lot of our classes are offered from an objective historical perspective rather than a subjective religious or faith or spiritual or cultural perspective. The Honest Witch classes, in particular, are taught from a biased perspective. They are taught from one particular person's perspective, and one particular person's, religion, tradition, spiritual path, culture, walk of life. So today's topic is the commodification of spiritual bypassing. And it's being taught from my perspective, the cultures I grew up in, the system I have developed for myself. And it may just not work for you. What I'm going to talk about just may not suit you. You may not want to hear it. You may not like it, and that's fine. I don't have a conversion that I'm trying to push you here. I don't know if that made sense.
You are not proselytizing.
I am not proselytizing. I'm not trying to convert you. I am just presenting a perspective, and it happens to be my own perspective. All right, so as Ian consistently reminds me, I need to define my terms before I get too in-depth on my classes. So let's define my terms: commodification and spiritual bypassing, because that's what we're talking about today. So commodification, pulling up my notes, is basically the action of treating something as a commodity. Now you can commodify goods, services, ideas, people. We have commodified people. Say again?
Welcome to late stage capitalism.
Welcome to late stage capitalism. Almost everything is commodified now. So it is treated as something for which you have to trade something of your work, your own intrinsic value as a human being, your money, your lifespan in order to attain. You have to purchase this via some kind of trade. You have to buy and sell it. That's what a commodity is. They are bought and sold. And what the currency is varies. But in late stage capitalism, the currency tends to either be hours of your life, your effort, the value of your work, or your money. That's what we tend to trade now. Commodification of spiritual bypassing. So we've talked before about the commodification of spirituality in general, and in particular about a particular tweak I'm witnessing where we have commodified the colonizing of spiritual paths that don't belong to us. We have commodified the exotic, non-Western cultures as something that you can purchase access to. And if you have purchased access to, that can be a form of your spiritual journey. And so you have lots of shops selling fake dream catchers and hamsas and smudge kits and whatever else people, malas and things, and sort of saying like, buy this from us so you can feel like you're making spiritual progress.
Buy this Om rock.
Yeah, buy this Om rock so that you can feel like you're making spiritual progress via commodification of a spirituality that didn't belong to you. So not only have we commodified spirituality, we've commodified colonialist, culturally appropriative spirituality. And because people put a lot of time and energy and money into pursuing that spiritual path, they're very resistant to being informed that something that they've done is inappropriate. So, to give you an idea of what we're discussing, what I'm talking about today is not just the commodification of spirituality, not just the commodification of spiritually appropriative, colonized spirituality, which is very common, but in particular, the commodification of spiritual bypassing. So let me define my term, spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is a form of spiritual practice that's very, very common right now. It is the use of spiritual practice and beliefs to dealing with painful feelings, self-development, developmental needs. Basically, the idea is it's a spiritual form of avoidance coping. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more, so bear with me. There are healthy ways to do the self-actualization movement. There are healthy ways to do the body positivity movement, the spiritual positivity movement, the positivity doctrine. There are healthy ways to be positive about our journey, our development, our struggles, the things that we're going through emotionally, our past traumas. There are healthy ways of being positive about our own needs and our own desires. There's definitely been a growth of encouragement to self-care, which right now, when we're being pressured for every moment of our lives to be worth something in a capitalist society, if you're not side hustling every moment, then you don't get to complain. Then absolutely that encouragement towards self-care and to being positive about our pursuit of self-care is really amazing. I'm not talking about that. I am not talking about the commodification of good spiritual positivity. I'm talking about the commodification of unhealthy spiritual positivity. So let's talk about what that is. Spiritual bypassing is a form of the positivity doctrine that encourages people to not confront their emotions, to not understand their emotions, to not process their emotions, to not develop healthy coping mechanisms, but rather to avoid it entirely by focusing only on some things that have been labeled as non-harmful, positive, or good. So it includes exaggerated detachment, emotional numbing, and repression. There's an overemphasis on only experiencing positive things. So happiness, joy, love, forgiveness. So it's very focused on being at peace, being full of forgiveness, being full of love. It actually uses some very racist terminology, but we'll move right along. It's anger phobic, it's rage phobic, it's grief phobic. It encourages blind and overly tolerant compassion and tolerance. Basically, you aren't ever allowed to be upset at something that you've witnessed that marginalizes, dehumanizes, objectifies, or in some way harms another person. Instead, you have to have this sort of general loving acceptance and tolerance for everything. It encourages weak and porous personal boundaries and lopsided development. So basically, it encourages you to use your cognitive abilities to just sort of sidestep emotional issues, and it decreases your emotional intelligence. It actually teaches you not to use your own emotional intelligence, and it teaches you not to use your own moral intelligence, your own moral compass. Instead, it encourages you to just accept everything that is occurring. It completely debilitates and deconstructs your ability to confront your own negativity, your own pain, the things inside you that are harming you. But it doesn't actually disarm those parts of you. It doesn't stop them from hurting you. It just deprives you of the tools that you use to pursue a health them, hurting you in the background. It encourages of the personal self and personal growth in the favor of spiritual growth, which is always nebulous and not really defined in a way that is helpful to people. And it encourages delusions that you have just arrived at a state of great wisdom and great knowing while you don't really know yourself at all, because you've been taught not to. Now I'm going to get into... Yes.
Someone in chat asked, is it like when something bad happens, instead of dealing with it, you give it to God so God can make things better?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is not unique to the New Age community or to the pagan community or to the spiritual. It is in no way unique to any of those. You find this... It's currently rampant in them. However, you can also find this in Christian churches. You can find this in Catholic spaces. You can find this in unhealthy Buddhist ashrams.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Did you see what just flashed?
Yeah. I've encountered this from bad therapists as well. And, okay, let's talk a little bit more about spiritual bypassing. And then we'll talk a little bit about commodification of spiritual bypassing. So, spiritual bypassing, in particular, says that you have all of this internal work going on. Maybe it's, just everyday growth as a person. We are not the same person at 30 as we were at 13. We start to understand the external world, and we start to understand our relationship with the external world in different ways as we grow up. We look back at ourselves as a child and we go like, wow, society encouraged me in toxic behaviors. Society encouraged me in ways that were hurtful towards others. Society shaped my interactions with other children in a way that hurt me and hurt others. So that healthy emotional growth is something that is supposed to occur naturally in all people. We develop emotional intelligence as we get older. And that emotional intelligence becomes the basis for our moral intelligence. So being able to look back and be like, wow, I wish I had handled that differently. If I get confronted with a situation like that again, this desire I had to have done this differently is going to shape how I respond in the future, because I don't want to be that person again. That is a healthy thing. One of the things that spiritual bypassing does is it encourages you not to have that reaction. And I'm talking specifically, remember, I'm not talking about the positivity doctrine in general. So let's look at this from a healthy way that positivity could approach this. A healthy way. I cannot go back and stop 6-year-old me from doing what I did. I cannot. But I can say that I will do better next time. And if I have kids, I won't say to them what my parents or teachers or authority figures said to me that encouraged that behavior in me when I was 6 years old. And I will not do that to someone again. If I can catch myself, I won't do it again. And I can forgive myself for being a child, for not knowing any better, and for being steered incorrectly by the adults around me. And I can focus on trying to do better next time. That is a healthy way of approaching this particular scenario with positivity. An unhealthy way would to be like, well, I live in the now, I don't think about the past, I don't want to hold myself to my actions from way back then. Those are an anchor. I'm cutting myself free of that. I have gone through a metamorphosis and I'm just not that person anymore. I am this being of pure love. So I'm not going to make those same mistakes, but I'm also not going to permit myself to look back long enough to learn how not to make the same mistake. So that's one method. Okay, so we're talking about how spiritual bypassing stops you from emotionally growing, but it also stops you from morally growing. So let's talk about stopping you from morally growing. One of the ways that we develop our ethical boundaries, our moral boundaries, our I will let myself do this thing, I will not let myself do this thing, is by processing the emotional mistakes we have made, by processing the emotional pain we've been through, by processing the emotional pain that we have dealt to others. And not just emotional pain, but mental and physical as well. But in particular, as we get older, we start being able to sort of go like, oh, I've pattern matched this. You know, when I have these stimuli going on, I do this thing, and I don't really want to do that thing because it makes me feel this way. And instead, I think I should make these other judgments, and I should steer myself in this other direction and not make that decision again. So a healthy version of positivity would be to be like, okay, well, I can't go back, I can't undo it, I can't fix it, but I can become a better person. I can grow. I can decide to do better things. I can decide to be a better person, and that's how I'll make it right. I can't erase it, but I can make it so that I don't do it again. And I can help the next person I see make the same mistakes. And I'll do so with compassion because, hey, I made those same mistakes. But I can provide a hand up and say, hey, look at the way you're being a weapon against yourself. Look at the way you're being a weapon against others. Let's get out of this unhealthy pattern. Spiritual bypassing, on the other hand, says, don't think about the things you did. Don't think about the way that people hurt you. Don't think about the way that you hurt others. Don't think about your embarrassment, your shame, the way it feels like you're bleeding out inside. And so you never learn to make that transition from emotional context to ethical context. You never learn to make that transition from this is how this felt, now this is what I will and will not do.
In fact, you get told, don't feel that, feel something else completely instead.
Yeah, they say don't feel that, feel this other thing instead. They say don't acknowledge that, look at this other thing instead. And so we have a whole generation of people so busy focusing on the now and being positive that they've never learned to make certain ethical judgments. They've never learned to make certain moral judgments. And if you, as a person, come and you're like, hey, you are being a weapon against me, I'm not okay with it, well then you need to learn to forgive and let go and be compassionate and tolerate them, and while you are only in pain because you're too bound to earthly,
Because you've been domesticated?
Yeah, I've been domesticated. I'm waiting to get to the worst example of this I've ever encountered in a person till I've gone through sort of my examples of positive way of doing this and really harmful way of doing this. We'll get there. So, hold on, I need my notes. I got distracted by the reference to the person who halfway inspired this class. And I say halfway because it was also a school. It was a school that is teaching this and charging a not insignificant monthly fee to teach this, which we'll get into in a minute, is my example of commodification. So, okay. Anger phobia. So one of the things that you get taught in spiritual bypassing as a spiritual system is that if you get upset angry, rage-filled, spite-filled, if you break down, if you focus on the negative, then A, you will attract more of that to you because everybody read The Fucking Secret.
And then got it wrong.
And then got it wrong. But so let me just put the brakes on here. This class is an honest witch class from my perspective. That does not mean that I get to denigrate or insult or in any way tear down the beliefs of others. That being said, I have to say this very carefully. There is a belief that is very prevalent that what you send out into the universe is what you receive, and that you receive it somehow magnified. There is a belief that's quite popular right now, and you find it in fundamentalist Christianity, you find it in the New Age movement, you find it in spiritualism, occultism, that if you send out negative things, you will get negative things back. I don't agree with this. This is not my perspective on reality. I don't. In my faith, in my culture, I think it is dangerous to say that everything that we have received is because we did something wrong. I think it absolves evil of responsibility, because there is evil in people's hearts. There is evil, and it does evil. People do evil things. And I think that if you say that all the bad things that happen to someone, to the children in Yemen who have bombs being dropped on them, to the children in Palestine who just had their water cut off, to the people who are drinking lead in their drinking water in Detroit, to the people who died in Puerto Rico when the power system failed. You're saying those things happened to you not because of the evil in men's hearts, but because you didn't love those men enough. You didn't send out enough love. You didn't send enough positivity. And I think that's a terrible thing. I think that if we say this, we absolve evil of its responsibility for its own actions.
Can I add a note to that as well?
Yeah, of course.
Can I say it to you and you can repeat it, or I can come talk?
Yeah, you can come talk. Ian's in pajamas. Pneumonia.
Right. Hi everyone, I'm in PJs, but I think it's also important to note that this philosophy of the idea that what everyone gets is what they send out amplified completely forgets questions of circumstance, and it absolves people who are in positions of privilege from actually having to do a damn thing to help others.
Because they can say,
well, that person should have sent out more love and resonated at a higher frequency. I've heard this, that person, and the fact of the matter is, it's really easy to resonate at a high frequency, whatever that actually means, when you have a trust fund giving you $150,000 a year, and you can take a 6-month guru training retreat to India for the low price of $75,000.
The 6 weeks guru guy.
No, specifically the one I was thinking of.
I'm thinking of.
I know you're thinking much harder to vibrate at a high frequency. What a child who's being, and we don't get to absolve that ability. But you also don't get to responsibility to fucking help others. And people do.
Stop.
I think that was what I wanted to say.
Thank you. So there's this overemphasis on being positive as being why good things happen to you, and being negative as being why.
Not actually.
Yeah. Do you have your inhaler?
Yeah, okay.
And being negative is why bad things happen to you. It's victim blaming. It's victim blaming. It eschews personal responsibility. Just people. Rather than saying, hey, what patterns of behavior led me to being vulnerable with the wrong person? Hey, what patterns of behavior led me to this painful place? What patterns of behavior am I in danger of repeating so that I get hurt again? Instead, more of myself. I just need to love more. I just need to pour myself out in larger amounts. I just need to be more positive about the way that this person is hurting me. And so instead of learning to assess the past and make healthier choices, someone is learning to shape their response to repeating unhealthy patterns as convince themselves to be grateful quicker, convince themselves to be more positive. And this, again, encourages a lopsided development. Cognitive self-manipulation, lying to yourself, that's what that is, cognitive self-manipulation. Convincing yourself that you're okay with something, that you're positive about it, and it teaches you to not have the emotional intelligence to say, whoa, the last time I made this decision, it hurt. I touched this fire last time, and rather than going, I'm going to be positive about how much it burns, I'm going to be positive about how much it burns, I'm going to go, I'm not going to fucking touch the fire. Sorry. It encourages weak and too porous boundaries. It encourages people to permit others to hurt them, to take advantage of them, to push them down, to tell them to blame themselves for what they're going through. It enables abusers. Abusers take the language of the positivity movement, twist it into encouraging spiritual bypassing, and they encourage you to have weak boundaries against them, porous boundaries against them, shifting boundaries against them. And I mean, there's a right way to be positive about having been abused. There's a right way, a healthy way. I shouldn't say a right way because it's not right for everyone.
Well, there are multiple healthy ways.
There are multiple healthy ways. A healthy way. A healthy way. Even if I was vulnerable, they shouldn't have taken advantage. I have the right to be vulnerable with people. I have the right to find people and give them my trust, and they should have seen that as a gift, and instead they saw it as an opportunity. And they should have been careful with my heart, and instead they were cruel to it. And it's not okay that that happened, but I'm not going to blame me. That's a positive way of dealing with abuse. A not positive way is to say, next time I will forgive faster. I should be looking for the positive lesson in what happened to me. I should know that I attracted this to myself. So, emotional numbing and repression. It teaches you not to fully experience your emotions, and it teaches you to do that by just dancing around them.
Right, this is the Jedi problem.
By using, this is the Jedi problem. There is no pain, there is no rage, there's no anger, there's only my spiritual progress, there's positivity. And
no, those things are still there. You didn't do anything.
Right, those things are still there. You didn't do anything. You just ignored them, which means that they're going to sneak up on you and act on you when you are least prepared for it. It encourages blind and overly tolerant compassion. So part of this whole, you have to love everyone, you can only be positive about what is happening to you, is that they turn around and they do it to other people. So if you, as a person of color or someone from the LGBTQIA community, or hell, just someone who has a vagina that's being super regulated in the United States, or you as of trauma, or you as a person who is non-neurotypical or who is disabled or who is in some way being marginalized, disadvantaged, dehumanized, objectified, get mad. They go, no, you should look at the positive here. You should be happy this is happening to you. There's a lesson here. And, they do it to themselves too. But what they don't do is accept your anger at the person who is hurting you. They don't want Jewish people to go get mad at Nazis. They want to say, oh, we can solve these problems with love. We can solve these problems by being positive about it. Have you ever tried having a conversation with them? Maybe if you forgive them, they'll see how wonderful you are as a person and they'll change their ways. If you just them while they're chanting that they want to put you in ovens, then they won't want to put you in ovens anymore. There's violence on both sides.
Now, what's funny is that they will never try and preach that to the Nazis.
No, They never try and preach that to the oppressors. No. They only preach it to the people who are being oppressed. It encourages this over-tolerant, not just, they let people hurt them. They won't acknowledge sexism. They won't acknowledge misogyny. They won't acknowledge racism. You see a lot of internalized prejudice. You see a lot of internalized bigotry. You see a lot of internalized twisted ideology where they find ways to make it acceptable that they themselves are dehumanized and objectified. And then they expect you to do it too. And that's part of spiritual bypassing. And it also encourages just debilitating judgment about one's own negativity. And I love that, sorry, in the comments, how about you just don't enslave people? All bold. Yes, I am on that page. Debilitating judgment about oneself. Now, we talked about having poor ethical, moral guidelines because you're not letting yourself process that emotional intelligence that creates those moral and ethical guidelines. But in particular, they also wind up in this really weird place. And I'm just gonna quote for a second what spiritual bypassing creates. Well, I'm just above that kind of thing. I guess I just don't even see race. I guess I just don't even see gender. I'm just above this meat suit. I'm just a really positive person and I just love people a lot and you're just really negative and hateful and I'm beyond that and I have moved to a higher level of understanding of things and I'm not going to let you drag me down to your level because that's really toxic and I am a higher level of being and you know what, if you don't like that, well then you need to go on a spiritual journey and learn to be more forgiving and more loving and more positive so that you can just get on my wavelength because I'm not getting on yours. Hold on, I'm not done. And if you don't like me the way I am, well then that's on you because I love me the way I am. Had that conversation before? 'Cause I've had it like twice a week, every week for the last 6 years. Now you can talk.
So, something that I really wish was a caricature, but isn't, because I've had that conversation aside. Every single thing we've mentioned so far, the complete lack of ability to handle anger or any kind of negative emotion, the inability to, or the desire to just think positive thoughts and love everything unconditionally, all of this is framed as being a form of spiritual enlightenment. And that's what makes it so insidious and annoying, depending on where you're at.
Because it legitimizes the avoidance.
Right.
It legitimizes it as a spiritual strategy.
And it gives, and it does, okay. from... I'm a little feverish, I'm a little loopy, so I'm about to go in a direction that I normally don't, which is a little more academic than usual. There's a field of study that I found about it fairly recently called mimetic epidemiology, which is basically the study of how ideas spread between people. Turns out religions are like viruses. And so are spiritual beliefs. Packaging an idea as religious or spiritual is a fantastic way to get it into as many host minds as you can as quickly as possible. This is one of the reasons I'm explicitly not allowed to start a religion.
Ian doesn't get to start a religion. He does not get to be a cult leader.
The two are not exclusively not the point. This means that by presenting this bypassing as a form of spirituality and giving people this like holier than thou, you should get up on my level attitude that comes with it, a bunch of people decide that they're going to get on that level too, and then you get a whole bunch of people who don't know how to deal with their own emotions, and it's a mess.
And they dress it up as exaggerated detachment and spiritual progress and delusions of having arrived on a higher level of being.
Also, just as a side note, if you have to tell me that you're enlightened, you're probably not. And if you get mad at me questioning whether you're enlightened, you're definitely not.
Yeah, okay, we'll get into that in a minute. In particular, one of the things that Ian is touching on how ideas spread, we know this. We know this from cults and cults of personality. We know that the fastest way for someone to spread an ideology that benefits them is to say, this brings you happiness, peace, knowledge of yourself, knowledge of the world around you. This brings you healing. This brings you to the answers. This brings you to the path. And there is no one path, and there are no one-size-fits-all answers, but there are millions of people looking for them. There are millions of people looking for the one right path, the one-size-fits-all answer, the hope, the peace, the joy, the comfort, and they will do anything to get it. They'll send seeds to a mega church in Texas, hoping that God will send them the money that they need while they give it dollar by dollar to a multi-billionaire who won't open his doors to the fucking homeless who are dying in floods because they think that's hypothetical. Because they've been sold the idea that this is the one path, this is the one way, this is the right answer, this is how you find it. These people have also been sold, this is how you find it. And in particular, they've been sold a really insidious version of it, because if it's not working for you, it's not that any one God doesn't exist. It's not that any one God doesn't like you or isn't on your side. No. It's that you're not good enough at it. You are too human. And they commodified it. And they commodified it with classes and webinars and workshops and retreats and crystals.
Oh, and 6-week guru trainings.
6-week guru trainings.
I think is it time?
Oh God, okay. Yeah, it's time. So recently, 2 things inspired this particular very ranty class. 2 things. Now, I said already that I deal with this ideology often. I said already that I deal with it often. I ended up making a post about how staying out of politics is privilege. that if you say politics doesn't affect you, or that you're just above it, or though you, and this is something I keep encountering, is people being like, well, I'm just spiritually above politics. That's so earthly, and it really just drags me down, and I'm just above it, and it's just not part of my life, and like, I just don't really care about politics. We ended up posting on my personal page that this is privilege, that this is a very privileged position, because it only comes from someone who doesn't have to worry that the jackbooted thugs are coming for them. You know, a black kid playing in a park has to fucking care about politics. A woman walking down the street in a headscarf has to care about politics. You know, a queer person has to care about politics. A person with a uterus has to care about politics. Before I went into the commodification of it, and before we started talking about what is avoidance coping, we were specifically talking about what inspired this class. And it was two things. One, we were saying I had posted something online about how not being involved in politics is a privileged position, saying that politics is a privileged position. With this post, Ian commented that he felt saying you didn't have to concern yourself in politics and that you were above it. You were, you know, spiritually beyond those earthly concerns, denoted a lack of empathy. Because basically, if you were privileged enough to say, this doesn't affect me, that's one thing. If you're that privileged and then you say, I also don't care that it's happening to anybody else, that denotes a lack of empathy. This led to someone who I know calls themselves a guru and teaches classes on spiritual paths, to come onto my personal page and say that I only cared about politics because I had a weak auric field and I was domesticated and they were feral. They
a
said
feral cat in specific. I wasn't part of this conversation. It was a wild ride.
They said that they were above the perils of their petty meat suit. And they said that they were sorry, she's very scratchy right now.
She wants my attention.
They said that they had plenty of empathy, but only for those who intruded on their personal auric field because they were trying to let go of all earthly concerns, that they were more spiritually advanced than we were, and that the fact that we cared about politics at all was a sign that we were not spiritually advanced beings, that we needed to get on their quantum wavelength. Yeah, it was a long conversation.
It was a
wild ride. But in particular, shortly thereafter, I started being encouraged to contact and be interested in and support the work of a spiritual school, I'm not going to name them, that teaches you to let go of your past, let go of your... It teaches spiritual bypassing. And the language that they use to tell you that they teach that, they specifically are like, we teach you...
Let go of your anger.
Let go of your anger, and we teach you to be positive, and we teach you to become a universal being, and are you pulling it up?
Yeah, give me a minute. I need to go through my history because I forgot the name already.
I got it. So
that's what it was. Okay.
I'm not going to tell you the name of the school. And I'm going to avoid their particular catchphrase because I don't want anyone to... they teach you to have a positive mindset so that you can rely on your intuitive development rather than your... Sorry.
And your intuition is all well and good, but I have a feeling that they want you to learn their intuition and not your own.
Well, in particular, I ended up meeting a couple of students and having some conversations with them. And one of the things that they were doing was selling very, very inexpensive crystals for a very, very high amount. Things that I know how much they pay. We supported ourselves with this small occult store, and the money that it made went directly back into the community, all of our profits. So basically we paid for rent, we paid for our community programs, we paid for restock. Nobody pulled a salary, and all the money went directly back into the community, all the profit. Wow, okay, sorry.
That's their actual website.
That's great. That's fantastic. Anyway, so I met with one of their students who was attempting to sell me some crystals, and they were selling me these crystals for way, 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 way more than they were worth.
Like double high-end retail,
like,
but
so,
saying that's their wholesale price.
Yeah, they were saying their wholesale price was double a high-end retail shop's price on those stones. And when I ended up being like, so I do the Quartzite show, I do Tucson's Arizona Gem show, I have an account through Village Rocks, I have an account through Driftstone Pueblo, you know, I have these accounts. I know how much this is. Kitty,
No.
stop it.
If you see me moving and snapping, I'm scolding my cat because she's...
Clawing at the furniture.
Yes, because she wants me to look at her.
She has a scratching post.
Yes. It's covered in violins right now.
Ah.
I'm going to fix that.
So, I asked this person, like, why is this so much money? And this person told me that it was because they were saturated in the positive healing energies of this space that the crystals had been stored in, that these two teachers of this school had poured their energies into the stones, and so the stones were worth more. And in particular, they poured universal life and light and love into the stones because they were these amazing enlightened instructors, and so the stones were worth more. And that if I had if I told people that I paid more for the stones in order for them to have these energies, then people would be willing to pay me for them more than I normally charge. And when I said I wasn't interested, this person became irate and told me, you know, that this school was going to do great things for the world and was going to usher in a new era of love and light, and that I needed to put my energies towards, because if I was towards supporting it, I would become a better person. I left, and then I spent the day ranting about it, just the entire day.
I love your rants. I love your rants so much.
But that tells me what they're telling their students. That tells me. I met them. I met their student. I know what they're telling their students. I know how much they're charging their students for crystals. And they're telling these people that this is life skill training. This is life skill training. This is healing training. This is, I think...
Oh my god. Sorry.
It's okay.
Minerva, don't be a butt.
That this is a way of manifesting your life goals, that this is a way of being a better person. And this is commodification of spiritual bypassing. Pay me money to teach you avoidance coping. Pay me money to teach you unhealthy coping mechanisms. Because if you do, if you pay me, I will open this path to you. I will open these doors to you, and you will become like me, a transcended being. And in particular, people often have blind and overly taught compassion. And so one of the things I found in these commodified spaces, is that they ignore really awful abuses of people. I have known, and I'm saying this about fundamentalist extremist Christianity that says everything is God's will and you should just be grateful for whatever God does to you. And I'm saying this about New Age spiritualists who say everything is the universe's way of teaching you a lesson. You should just be grateful and learn the lesson and be positive that it happened to you. And I'm saying it, so this is not unique to any one religion, but they say essentially, pay me money so that I can tell you that everything is the will of the divine, and that if you do these avoidance coping steps, you will be happy and healthy and well, and good things will happen to you. And while it's happening, if bad things happen to you, I will A, tell you to forgive the person who is doing it to you. B, I will tell you to look for the positive lesson in it. C, I will tell you that you should forgive and love and, be complicit in what happened to you by having porous boundaries so that the person can do it again. And D, I won't remove that person because A, they're paying me money, and B, they're part of my student base, legitimizes my authority, and C, I forgive them for hurting you because I forgive everyone for hurting people.
There's one thing you forgot.
Okay.
Blame the person for getting hurt.
Yeah, blame the person for getting hurt.
Because they didn't put out enough whatever in order to prevent the universe from doing that to them. That is another common thing that I've seen.
One of the things I've seen, and I'll be clear, this was not from this school that just started this rant, but I've seen something in the spiritual community that teaches spiritual bypassing, wherein there was this person who was very predatory and engaging in a great deal of sexual misconduct and really hurting people. And these women that he targeted told that he targeted them due to a flaw in their own spirits, that they had left themselves open and had attracted his attention because they craved pain. They were told that this negative thing happened to them because they craved negativity and drew it to themselves. This is about William.
Okay, I was about to say, is this creepy old guy who got banned or pro guy?
This is creepy old guy who got banned.
Okay.
They were told that they had like a hole in themselves that they needed to address, and that he would never have been attracted to them if they didn't have that hole. And then they were told that in order to heal that hole, they needed to remember and prioritize his spiritual progress and his spiritual journey, and they had to help him become a better person, and that's how everyone would find healing about what had happened.
Reasons why I've been told to forgive my father.
Oh man, I ripped into the person who was saying all these things, and I'm not invited to certain parties anymore. That's okay, I don't want to go. I know that if something happened to me, I know what they would say. But this very persistent ideology is now codified. These people want tithe, whether you're talking about, a Christian or Catholic fundamentalist extremist church that's telling you to be grateful to God, or the one person keeps inviting me to rituals there, and I'm like, you don't want me there. Like, every time I come, we get in fights. I know what you say about me. Like, students have overheard you. You don't want me there. Why are you inviting me? But I guess they're trying to be positive towards me. They've said essentially, give me money to teach you to numb your own emotions, examine your detachment from yourself and from others, repress your history, your pain, not learn how to actually address anything that's going on with you, overemphasize the positive, be phobic towards your own negative emotions, practice blind and overly tolerant compassion, have really weak and porous boundaries, develop lopsidedly, have debilitating judgment on who you are as a person.
Nailed it.
So in particular, this avoidance coping or escape coping is not only a maladaptive coping mechanism, but there are a group of people, all of whom are very privileged, and I have not been able to figure out if this is an intentional, manipulative, borderline evil, intentional thing that they're doing, or whether they bought it themselves, and the fact that they're making themselves wealthy doing it is just kind of an accident because of the way that capitalism commodifies spirituality in the first place. And I think that the reason I'm having such a hard time pegging that down is that it varies. That there are people who are intentionally essentially structuring cults that funnel money towards them in exchange for false spiritual progress, and who use this language of spiritual bypassing so that you don't realize how badly they're hurting you, and so that you will excuse it and ignore it and blame yourself for it while they laugh their way to the bank. And that there's also people who've genuinely bought into it
and who see making money from it as a verification that it works.
Yeah, as a, I'm making money doing this, that must mean that the universe likes that I'm doing it. I'm having positive success at this, that must mean that you can too. And it's like they've bought the pyramid scheme, and that's what it is. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a pyramid scheme of maladaptive coping. So let's talk about maladaptive coping. Coping, I can talk, really I can. Basically, escape coping or avoidance coping is you don't deal with the stressor. You attempt to protect yourself by just avoiding the stressor. Spiritual bypassing is a form of avoidance coping. And in particular, it's a pattern that's found in CPTSD. In CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, people tend to engage a great deal in maladaptive coping, in avoidance coping. And one of the things I'm finding is that the schools that are teaching spiritual bypassing and charging you for this path is that they target people who get out of abusive relationships, who get out of long-term abusive relationships with other religions and with other religious authorities, people who get out of unhealthy family situations. And the thing is, the brain really wants to do this. If you have CPTSD, it very much wants to do maladaptive coping. It's what it will try to do anyway. And if you have a spiritual and religious authority saying, not only do your instincts want you to do that, so you should listen to those instincts, but that is the one true path and the way to enlightenment and happiness and all the answers, and it's a way to make sure that nothing bad happens to you ever again, and here's this $50 amount that you owe me every month to tell you to go ahead and walk down those unhealthy steps that your brain wants to take anyway.
Yep. Although it's usually more than $50, but yeah.
Yeah, oh gosh. Oh, I've seen some high price tags. There's this one person out here where if you are one of her personal students, it is $3,000 a month to be one of her personal students and learn this shit.
Damn, that is more than I make in a month.
Yeah, that's more than I make in a month.
Jeez.
Actual coping with CPTSD or other just emotional growth looks like acknowledge, comprehend, express. Acknowledge, comprehend, and find a healthy means of expressing. That's what it looks like. Now you can learn that through cognitive behavioral therapy or psychoanalytical therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy. Really, it focuses on breaking down avoidance coping and learning healthy ways of accepting your ish and committing to better ways of dealing with that ish. There's all kinds of healthy ways of doing this. And there's even healthy ways of avoidance coping. There are healthy means of avoidance coping. So, avoiding potentially harmful patterns of behavior.
I do that.
Right? Avoiding potentially triggering environments. Avoiding self-recrimination spirals, avoiding toxic people, avoiding feelings of self-recrimination. These things can be done through, healthy coping mechanisms. They can be done through exercise and meditations. For example, if you say, hey, I have an unhealthy coping mechanism where I binge drink, I'm going to avoid that unhealthy mechanism of addressing my trauma. And instead of binge drinking, I'm going to go out to eat with my best friend. Every time I want to binge drink, I'm going to go seek out my support system and seek a distraction. That is a healthy version of avoidance coping. There are absolutely healthy ways of doing the positivity doctrine.
It gets better.
It gets better.
It gets better. You
I can
survive
get through this.
Like,
tomorrow will come and today won't seem as overwhelming.
there's a
Experience the
balance.
full healthy spectrum of your emotions. Learn emotional intelligence. Learn emotional intelligence.
I'm still figuring out the difference between anger and fear. It's a process.
It is a process. All of this is a process. And the thing is, the people who are commodifying it are teaching you that there is an easy one-size-fits-all answer. And it's to just ignore the pain.
It turns out that fits almost no one.
Turns out that fits almost no one.
Isn't it
Ironic,
one
yeah,
size
you're
fits all usually fits no one? What is that saying?
Something like that.
Something
one
like
size
that.
fits all is one size fits none.
Yeah, or if it sounds easy, they're trying to sell you something.
Right. If it sounds too easy, they're trying to sell you
I feel
something.
like the only person that really fits is Batman.
Batman has so many unhealthy coping mechanisms. Nobody try to be Batman.
He dresses up like a bat and beats up criminals. That is like of unhealthy coping mechanism.
Not only is it an unhealthy coping mechanism, it's a pathological unhealthy coping mechanism. He is not capable of stopping.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'm closing this with an apology. I'm saying that this one thing is dangerous and it's unhealthy and it's documented as causing long-term problems for people. But I don't have an easy substitution. I don't have a, don't do that, do this instead. Because the other way is going to look different for absolutely everyone. Your version of acknowledge, understand, express healthily is going to look different from my version of acknowledge, understand, express healthily is going to look different from Tina's version of acknowledge, understand, and express healthily. Everybody is going to look different. Some of you will turn to gods and goddesses to give you the support and feeling of power and guidance to do that. Some of you won't. Some of you may turn to atheism and say, I don't believe in anything, because if there was anything out there, some of this shit would not be happening. We'd be seeing more interference in it. And that may be where you find your strength and your shelter. Some of you may spend the rest of your life searching and not finding the right or the easy or the best fit of ways to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
And it just is. I don't have an easy answer, but it's not this.
Definitely not this.
Definitely not this. I guess to close, I don't want to take away from this that you're not worthy of love, that you're not worthy of peace and happiness and positive things coming to you, that you won't find those things, that you have to spend the rest of your life wallowing in the bad things that happened. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I've met quite a few people who are spiritually bypassing who, when I'm like, hey, you might want to turn around and confront and accept that shit, they think that I mean stare at it, drown in it, don't move past it. No.
Well, stare at it maybe.
Stare at it,
Examine
sure.
it.
Examine it. Understand how it's becoming a weapon against you, a weapon against those around you. Understand how it's leading you down the same paths over and over and over again. Understand your trauma addiction, or your, learn who you want to be as a person and what you're willing to take. But I'm not saying stand in the bad place forever, or always feel rage and unhappiness and negativity. I firmly believe that there is a path towards healing for everyone. I firmly believe that there is a path towards building a self that you can live with, building a self that you can be content with, building a self that most days doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt anybody else. Building a self that knows its own value enough that it's not complicit in its own dehumanization, that it's not complicit in its own marginalization, oppression, objectification, that it's not complicit in the pain that's being caused towards it. I do think everyone has that path. I do think everyone has it. But I don't know what it looks like for each of you. And I'd be lying if I said I had an answer for every single person out there. I only know what worked for me.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those, you've got to find it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time, and a lot of time. It takes a lot of trial and error and pain and fucking up, and then eventually you figure it out-ish, probably.
Yep, and then you start over again at the beginning. I learned all my ways, and then I learned the ways that those ways hurt me, and then I learned the adjusted ways, and then I learned the ways that those ways hurt me, and then I learned the adjusted ways, and I have more good days than bad days now. And that's where I am. So, alrighty. I think that's everything for today. I hope you all have more good days than bad, and that you make progress towards a healthy interaction with your own self and with people around you.